Dobre večera. Greetings from Odesa, Mama, here on the shores of the Black Sea. Right behind me, we've got the iconic Odesa Opera House. You can see it's really autumn at the moment. Maybe you can see the colors there in the trees. They got those browns and oranges. People walking around in probably a jacket at this point. The seasons have definitely changed. I was looking at all the leaves, brown leaves here on the ground. And welcome to an impromptu live stream. I hadn't planned to shoot outdoors again for the foreseeable future for these live streams. I was actually going to take a break from them for at least a month. But I brought forward this live stream because, as you can see behind me, it's quite a nice time to film in Ukraine. I'm here in Odesa still. I actually had intended to be in Chisinau this weekend in neighboring Moldova, but for some so what kind of reasons should I say? It's the truth. I hurt myself in the gym, so I'm actually down here still for another few days until I am back to full 100% capacity, and I'll probably go up to Chisinau next week. So today we're going to have a little bit of discussion about the Ukrainian Bride Business, because this channel in the last few months have talked a lot more about business, especially here with you in Ukraine. Obviously, we're at the time of the Russo-Ukrainian war. I will shoot my live stream for the geopolitics channel. There's a link to that down below in the description of this live stream later today. We got a lot going on in Pokrovsk in the east of Ukraine in the war. And since I've started talking more about business, the opportunities that there are in spite of the war and because of the war in some shapes and forms, a lot of guys have reached out to me who have already invested in Ukraine or are thinking of investing in Ukraine. So I'm actually going to launch a program very soon, similar to the programs I had for moving to Ukraine back in the day. And make sure you're on my mailing list for that to be notified. There is a link down below. You'll see I think I call it Connor's Hotspots for Chisinau, Kyiv, and Kazakhstan down there. Anyways, that free gift will also get you on my mailing list. That's where I launch my products. So this will be an online program. So if you are interested in business in Ukraine, you would want to be aware of that. Just make sure that you're on the mailing list. That will be launched pretty soon. So we're going to talk about another business on this live stream, which is Ukrainian Bride Business. So for people who maybe stumbled across this without really knowing too much about Ukraine and maybe the whole marriage agency business, we're not talking about some sort of bride market where families bring their daughters to be wed off. I've seen that in some other parts of Europe, especially with the Roma. Whether that's really true or not, or just a bit of a myth, that's not what we're talking. We're not talking about mail order brides, because as far as I know, one was actually mailed over anywhere. That would be human trafficking. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about the huge industry that had this country really as one of its centers, at least in terms of marketing, for many, many years. And that has been on the decline and now gone into a steep reversal in terms of the interest. So I'm going to talk about that. I did make a video back in 2022 where I predicted that it would go the way of the Estonian bride business. There is a mockumentary from the early 2000s. It is called Screwed in Talent, is the English translation. I wasn't able to find it with English subtitles, and my Swedish isn't the best, but I could get the gist of it because in parts they speak in Russian and in English. So that used to also be a phenomenon in other parts of Europe that I now go to with my clients, like Estonia, but no one has even heard of it for 25 years, more or less. It kind of disappeared in the late 90s, early 2000s, right around the time when Estonia and its economy and its access to European Union, that later became a member state in 2004, that all changed and suddenly that industry completely disappeared. But it's a great mockumentary to go and take a look at. You will see a lot of similarities to what actually used to happen here in Ukraine with these romance stores if you go and watch that. So some housekeeping before I get into the presentation part of today's live stream. You can write your comments and your questions down below as I go through it. And for those of you who don't know me, Привет, I am Connor Klein, and I help high-level men with living their dream lifestyles in this part of Europe that I dub New Europe in general. So includes Ukraine in spite of the war. I used to have the biggest channel for lifestyle and relocation to Ukraine before 2022. I have been here for the entire period of the COVID shenanigans, and yeah, that was over 2 years. So I basically documented most of this country. I shot vlogs in almost every city. If I'd actually, this invasion happened maybe 6 months later, I think I would have covered everywhere in Ukraine, but there are a few cities that I didn't get to cover. And now I help my clients mainly with the alternatives to Ukraine. So going to cities and, well, cities like Chisinau in Moldova, just up the road. I've mentioned Estonia and Tallinn. You got Riga in Latvia, Vilnius in Lithuania, also counted as the second city, Warsaw, Poland, and Almaty and Astana in Kazakhstan. I was recently in Kazakhstan with a client, and I will be going back there in January, end of January. That is the current plan, and also probably at the end of March with clients. So if you're interested in those alternatives, I have a lot of links down below that will be of interest to you. There's a consulting if you want to get my in-depth knowledge, my over 10 years of encyclopedic knowledge of this region, then that's a possibility down below. Or you can apply for the in-person premium immersion, and that's when I go with clients to a city in the region. Also have been started bringing some clients back to Ukraine, and we actually went to Chernovtsi and Lviv, then through Chisinau, Moldova, down here to Odesa back in August. So there's all the other things. I also have guides and stuff like that. If you're coming to Moldova and Ukraine, there's a guidebook down there. It'll save you loads of time in terms of finding the best spots. My hospitality guide is really something that's unmatched there. And again, because I've started using these AIs a lot more, the AI can help you figure out where to go in these cities, at least not yet. I'm not sure if they can really find a solution unless they buy my guide and then they feed that into the AI, I guess. That'll be the only way to do it. And things change all the time. So all that good stuff is down below. As I said, I'm going to have the new program pretty soon. And yeah, that's all I have for housekeeping. I want to get into this presentation as quickly as possible because there's a lot I could talk about. I wanted to give it a little bit more of a business angle in this live stream because I made lots of reaction videos to the Ukrainian Bride Business. I've also interviewed and given interviews to channels that deal with this, especially over the last few years. And I even have a playlist down below. I should probably add in my interviews, but they're in French, so you have to speak French. Or I guess nowadays you can probably figure out a way to get it to dub my voice or something. Maybe there's an option to have automatic subtitles in English. Anyways, if I remember later, I will put that also on the playlist where I gave interviews to a matchmaking channel in French, C'est que me. I enjoy watching their content. It's the only it's the only people I actually watch from. Antoine is the only person I watch from this kind of sphere really anymore. Obviously, in preparation for this live stream, when I had a look at many of the videos from the Ukrainian Bride Business just to see what they're all up to, the ones that still survive. So we are interested in just a lot more information about this whole industry, maybe even tempted to use a matchmaker, or you're already using one, or you just got some curiosity. Down below I had put it together in a playlist, so you can go watch that, and then you have probably a few hours of content that you can go and get more in depth in the topic. So what am I talking about when I say the Ukrainian Bride Business? I think we need to go back to the origins, which would have been post-communist Central and Eastern Europe. So we had the Cold War. It was very hard to travel to countries like, well, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union at the time, but now obviously independent Ukraine, or go to the other parts of the, say, Warsaw Pact, so countries like Poland. It was hard to go to Hungary. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania were all part of the Soviet Union, so you couldn't go there easily either. It was very hard to leave. So there wasn't much communication between these two parts of Europe, or this part of Europe and, say, North America or Australia, or, say, the core Anglosphere, the collective West, right? They were in two different blocks during the Cold War. That ended, and the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, and we had all these new 15 constituent republics that became independent states. And there was widespread economic turmoil in Central and Eastern Europe. They had command economies, they've been communist, and when they changed to become capitalist, there was a lot of disruption in the society, and the economies basically suffered a lot in, we'll say, the 90s, and then that started to recover, we'll say, from the 2000s And parts of the region decided that they saw their future not with Moscow, but with Brussels and with Washington. So they made a beeline to join Euro-Atlantic institutions like European Union and NATO, so countries like Poland, newly independent Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, Hungary, Czechia, Slovakia. Actually, they split up into two countries. Czechoslovakia became Czechia and Slovakia, and so forth. So you had a situation where people here, there have been major disruption to the societies. Male mortality skyrocketed. So many men died young in the 1990s in countries like Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, also in, we'll say, the Baltic states. And it was very hard still to travel. Even though the Iron Curtain had come down, you needed a visa to go to the United States, even as a tourist, and to Western Europe. So that's the backdrop. It's very, very poor here. A lot of men have, alcoholism was rife, the economy had collapsed. A lot of men were unemployed or underemployed, died young, and it was hard to leave. Also, tourism wasn't so widespread here, obviously more than during the Soviet times, but still pretty limited. Communication back then, we had, the internet existed, but we didn't really have, we didn't have dating apps at all to start with, but we also didn't really have that much connectivity. Facebook would have started, let me think, when did it become popular? When did I first have one? I'd have to think about it. It was probably after I finished even grad school. It was probably mid-2000s even. Or is it early 2000s? Sometime around then, I guess. Yeah, maybe it's probably almost, is Facebook even 20 years old? So we're talking about the 90s, none of that existed. So you had a huge discrepancy. You have still television and the movies showing people in this region how prosperous it is in countries like the US. That's why I always say America, I kind of dream to go there, or even to go to Paris or London. And not many ways to get there. So this is kind of the backdrop where this started. And as a result, you had lots of women here who would want to leave a country like Ukraine, a country like Estonia, a country like Hungary, because of the economic situation and just in general, a lot of men having died early, and they would want to go and start a life in, say, Paris, New York, Toronto, wherever it happens to be. So how are they going to get there? Because even getting a student visa or a tourist visa is very, very hard to even go visit. Plus, people here had no money. How could they afford to go there? How would they be able to sustain themselves, get a work visa? All this was extremely difficult in the 90s and 2000s. When it started becoming a bit easier, say the 2010s, for a lot of people in this region. So there weren't many ways. So in steps, what started, I guess, as a cottage industry where agencies would set up tours for local women here to meet Captain America, I don't know. To meet an American gentleman who is single, who's come here. They would have organized tours, or they had brochures, I think they used to send off. People would go through the catalogs, see who they wanted to probably converse with. Maybe they sent letters in the beginning. Level English was very low here. Not too many people speak Russian or Ukrainian, obviously in the US or France, any of these guys, so they would need translators. So you have this kind of cottage industry, I guess, that started as, that sprung up to help these guys. So they were providing a service. They were matching women who were interested primarily in leaving, let's be frank about it. For, hypergamy is a cross-cultural phenomenon where women tend to date across and up on socioeconomic hierarchies. So that's, something they were trying to satisfy by really dating up, by getting to go to America or maybe it was somewhere else. And how could they meet men who would be interested in them? Very hard. Didn't have Instagram. You didn't have Tinder or a dating app where, it's possible nowadays, obviously, just do that and talk to people pretty easily. So they were matching these American or Swedish or German men with these women. They were organizing tours, I guess they came, or they were sending catalogs and helping, facilitating the communication back and forth. And I think probably when they started off, they were generally helping people. Women here were considered more beautiful, and for guys who were looking, obviously you have that mismatch of socioeconomic opportunity with local beauty, and maybe there's something about the values. I don't think that was advertised as much back then in the beginning as it is now by the marketing. So I also don't think radical feminism was such as big in, say, the 90s as it is today. I think that's clearly the case as over 30 years has gone by. So mainly it was these opportunities to meet, and they were able to facilitate it. This then grew because you have translators. Guys are paying a significant amount of money to come on tours. You got the hotels they stay at. They go to restaurants. So as a business, you have lots of ways to make money, right? So the guy's going to go to a restaurant. He's going to bring the woman. Maybe he's going to offer her a gift, flowers. Maybe go and buy her a handbag or something, I don't know, as a gift. Not that I recommend doing any of that in general for someone that you don't know very well before you're in a relationship, a real relationship, not a notional one. So there were just lots of people along the chain that could make money, and obviously there would be a way for the person who facilitated, the agency owner, I guess is how we describe them, to take a percentage along the way. So kind of normal business, and it was probably pretty small, I would guess, and pretty simplistic. And there was a real demand, a genuine demand. Women really here wanted to flee, wherever it was, whether it was Ukraine or Romania or Estonia or Russia, right? So it also wasn't centered on one country in particular. It was kind of the general region. You had a lot of these cottage industries. Then in like the 2000s, the internet starts to get better, right? We still don't have dating apps as competition for services like this. And people start to travel a bit more. It's still pretty hard to get a visa in most of the region. However, 2004, most of Central and parts of Eastern Europe actually joined the European Union. That means that they can travel freely and actually move. And if they want to meet a German or French guy, well, they can move to Paris or to Frankfurt or wherever it happens to be and meet them, right? So there's the ease of travel like transforms in the region, and you see that bride business basically disappear in countries like Estonia, just because I know about the mockumentary, and also a Swedish guy of mine, he told me that it used to be a phenomenon in the mid to late 90s, so these romance tours to Estonia by Swedish men, that also disappeared and was kind of seen in the same vein as what we had here in Ukraine. However, some countries didn't get so much access, one of them being Ukraine here. But what they did change is I think it would have been after the Orange Revolution in 2004, they gave visa-free for North Americans and Western Europeans actually come here without a visa. Because remember, the other side of the coin is it was actually hard for us to come to a country like Ukraine. You used to have to get a visa, and there weren't, I remember even myself, I think it would have been 2001, maybe 2002. So my friend said, I was in the Netherlands studying, and they said, let's go to St. Petersburg and trip. I said, okay, St. Petersburg, don't know much about it. And then they were like, we need visas. And I was like, visa? I need to get a visa to do this. I got to go to the embassy, give an application form. And I've done that later to go to St. Petersburg. It was many years later. And it was a lot of hassle. So that all changed here in Ukraine. You didn't need a visa anymore. And that made it a lot easier for guys to come here. And also with the internet, everything started to get turbocharged. And I think that's probably when it started to become a mass industry and also involve a lot of scamming, because as you see, there are a lot of people in the business scheme who can make money. You got the translators, you got the restaurants, you know where this is going, and then you've got actually the matchmaking itself, or women going on dates, going shopping. So basically, as things, I guess, became more efficient, they started figuring out what guys were reacting to on this side. And this became the center of it, in a sense, because it didn't have the access to Western Europe and North America for the locals. But it was easier to come here than, say, going further east, going to Belarus or Russia. So it seemed like there was a bit of a switch, and it became very focused on this country, Ukraine. As you can see, well, if you're paying a translator, there's an incentive for the translator to be involved. What does that mean? All the girls will say they don't speak English. That's an incentive. They bring you to a restaurant. Of course, you're going to go on a date. Well, what's you going to order from the restaurant? Is it going to be the lobster and champagne? Is the bill going to be the local price, or is it going to be suddenly a price 4 times higher? There's an incentive for them to have scam restaurants. So scam translators, scam restaurants. And yeah, the shopping scam as well, where they just bring the guy scam to shopping, and she picks out something and probably doesn't even returns the next day and takes a percentage on the sale and all that kind of stuff. So you had an incentive for a lot of scamming. And I think that's why it burgeoned into such a disreputable general industry. We're talking about the whole thing in general. Then you had online, where there was a switch to charge guys to talk, right? So basically they would have, we'll say, something brides, and then you were talking to these women, but of course you wouldn't be speaking on video, you'd be doing chat, and of course you can't see if it's, Dima from Dnipropetrovsk, or even the guy could be, I know, Emmanuel in Mexico, to be frank. You wouldn't know where he is, or someone sitting in the Philippines or in Siberia. It doesn't even have to be one female, even in Ukraine at all. And they were basically just writing. I remember I dated a girl briefly, and it was summer, maybe 2017 already, I don't know, it was many years ago. And she had done that even though she didn't even speak English. She'd basically been doing the messages as a student for like a summer. Even though she didn't speak English, she was doing copy paste, and she would figure out what the guys would react to the most, and then be able to keep them on the chat as long. So you had this huge growing industry where they were basically doing what we call pay per letter, or PPL, which is you're paying per message, and that obviously is a huge incentive for scamming, because, well, the longer they keep you to stay on, the more money they make. If you exchange 2 messages and meet the middle of your life, they don't make any money, so they don't have an incentive to do that. So you have all these bad incentives, everything became kind of turbocharged, and we'll say probably around the late in the 2010s, even in Ukraine, things started to change. By the mid-2010s, they even had visa-free to go to, at least as a tourist, to Western Europe. Still pretty hard to go to the US, but we also had dating apps come in. That means, why would you need to be paying for a service to connect you with a woman in Odesa? If you want to speak to someone from Odesa, you can go into Tinder, pay the premium, and swipe, and you can meet women in Odesa. And in general, just the technology evolved to kind of render this a little bit obsolete, even if it's genuine, which most of the industry seemed to have deteriorated into something that wasn't very genuine. And travel became a lot more frequent. A lot more guys were coming. I remember when I used to first come to Ukraine, I think it was 2009, it was like, wow, you're going to Ukraine. That's so obscure. I think by 2015, 2016, definitely by the late 20-teens, it was kind of normal. It wasn't that shocking a thing for at least someone from Western Europe to go to Ukraine. Maybe from the US or Canada would be a bit more obscure. So yeah, just all the dynamics changed. Now you do have, I would say, a small part of the industry that is kind of trying to generally match people. But they have to compete with all this disingenuous stuff. So you got all the scamming in person, you got the scamming online, plus then you have the photos where they would obviously just, in the beginning, seem to steal women's photos, and then at a certain point, probably because of the credit card companies and them insisting that it's actually a person who has agreed to be on the site, they would start to send messages to attract the women here in, say, Odesa or somewhere else, for the rights to use their photos, a bit like a modeling gig almost, like you just sell the rights to the photos, and then they pretend to view online, do all the messages, and that's how they would scam even further. So you even have a real person. Then it evolved even to paying girls to do little video messages. Hey, hi John, thanks for all the flowers. Hi, thanks for the phone. And then she would do 10 of those in a row and collect your check, right? So just a huge ability to scam and deceive a lot of guys who are obviously naive about what's going on. Same time, you do have a small part of the industry that is genuinely trying to match people. However, as that evolves, there's less and less a pool of eligible women to choose from. So yeah, because it's not the 1990s. They can speak to guys from the West. A lot of guys from the West come here. I mean, Ukraine and 2025 is basically part of the West anyway, it's de facto. But we'll say it was a little bit more of a distinction 10 years ago. And why would they need a matchmaker to connect them? They can meet foreign guys come here, the foreign guys can meet them, they can meet them online, they can meet them in person, they can travel afterwards. Plus you got other countries that become super wealthy and attract, like Dubai, for example. How many Ukrainian women have gone to Dubai, at least on a trip? Also for a lot of other viceful reasons I can imagine as well. So just the world is not like in 1995. So that is why I think as it's gone from a cottage industry to a huge, predominantly scam industry. I think there was some crazy number at some point. They were talking about 300 million as a business, the scam part of the business. But that was not just Ukraine, but also using other nationalities was one stat I think we had from back in the day when we were talking about the scams. Fast forward, and we have the 2022 invasion of Ukraine by Moscow. And yeah, that's changed things even further, because up until that point, whilst Ukrainians have visa free to access the European Union or Schengen, actually didn't have visa free to access Ireland, but they changed that the day after the invasion. I think the UK, they may still need a visa even. But overnight, because of this horrific invasion, I mean, the war started in 2014 with the invasion of Crimea and the occupation of parts of Donbass by Russia. This meant that Ukrainian citizens who can leave the country, which is basically women and children and old people, but we're talking about single women here, they can leave Ukraine and live in the European Union. So they're kind of like de facto EU citizens, at least up until I think it's March 2027 for now. So they're already in Western Europe, so they basically can meet as many French, German, Spanish, Italian, British guys as they want. If they go to Warsaw, they can probably meet so many American guys, because there's so many Americans there nowadays. Or they can meet Asians, they can meet Africans, they can meet basically anyone they want. So many of them have left. They basically can travel. There was even a time they could just go to America at the beginning with the Biden administration's Unite for Ukraine program. That's been canceled since, or suspended. It's actually pretty hard to get to America, I think, probably now as an immigrant. And also to Canada, they had for about a year or maybe two, they even could just move to Canada if they got a visa. So basically the dynamics have changed even further away from a pool of eligible women who really genuinely want to go to a matchmaker, because who really wants to go to a matchmaker if you already have lots of options? Well, no one. So that is a short synopsis. It still took me 20 minutes, as you can see. So to talk about the business part, because I actually got a call from a Ukrainian guy who was asking me about this because he thought it'd be a great idea, because there's so few of them left. He was saying that he wanted to start a business where he brings tours. Obviously, we have a war here, so not going to be too many guys who want to come to Ukraine. We're just looking for a wife to export back to the United States. It's another issue with exporting, like just meeting someone and bringing them to your home country. First of all, they're going to live there, and they're going to figure out what family law is like in the US or the UK, and that's going to create very bad incentives for the longevity of your marriage. You can try a prenup, might work, might not work, but you have to realize that just because here family law is not set up against normally the man or the socioeconomic superior partner in a marriage, and normally, but they're going to figure that out. They're going to be cackling down with the other girls from their region, probably at the beauty salon, no matter where it is, whether it's Washington. Probably there's even one in rural place like Idaho these days, but have a lot of Ukrainian, Russian, or Belarusian women, and they will figure all that out. Plus, you have the effect where if you bring a woman from here the competition for beauty is super high. Overall, if we take the general region, the place that I think, on average, women are the most beautiful in the world. If we take that scale of 1 to 10, whether that's great or not as a metric, but most guys understand it, and you take a woman who's, say, an 8 here, and you bring her, no, let's start with a 5, just the average person. 5 here, and then you bring her to somewhere in the US, maybe in a big city, maybe she's a 7, she already done 2 points. You bring her to a rural area, now she's an 8. So you can see what the issue might be once she has residency in that country through the marriage with the guy who brought her there, is that the incentive for her to stay with him is going to be nothing like it was when she needed to leave. Because at that point she'll have residency, her value in that local labor market is going to be so much higher than it was here in, say, Ukraine or somewhere else in the region, and she'll probably figure out family law at that point and realize she can make a lot of money and get a partner who's a lot higher value. And that's a huge incentive. Doesn't mean everybody does that, but I did have one client in the past who had been married to a Russian woman in the 2000s in Canada, and he told me he hung out with a group of Canadian men that were married to women from Poland, from Ukraine, from Belarus, from Russia, and he said that 80% of those marriages failed once the woman had residency, or maybe even citizenship, but probably usually get perm residency first. They obviously have a different system in Canada and the US, but green card, most people understand what I mean. So that is the big, I guess, other issue and risk with the whole industry, is that, yeah, how effective is it going to be? Does it really make sense in 2025 going into 2026? I understand it probably made a lot of sense, and it was probably a legitimate business back in the 1990s. Probably started to get corrupted in the 2000s. hit its heyday in terms of making money in the 2010s and now is on the decline. You see that with so few of the former participants in that industry making content even nowadays on YouTube. You still have a few of them. I still get questions from guys, and obviously this Ukrainian guy even called me about it. But yeah, the thing is, how many guys are going to come during the war? I see there was one company that organized a romance tour, and their hotel, which is around here, was almost hit by a rocket. Can you imagine? So yeah, probably not the best for advertising coming here, but at least they put it in the video. They were transparent about that. Their tour group almost got hit by a rocket. So not too many guys going to be as interested before. The other thing is a lot of money was spent normally by the scammers, the scam part of the industry. They figured out that a lot of guys respond to this traditional Ukrainian bride stereotype, which is basically a fetish, and they would, when they're doing the whatever PPL, the fake chat and stuff, they would just pretend to be this like submissive type of housewife who just wants to cook and clean and do all this stuff for the guy, I guess, and whatever he wants to hear, they would basically tell him. They just finesse him because they want to keep him on the chat for as long as possible, make as much money. And obviously they have some photo where she looks like a supermodel, and that even evolved from what I heard from some guys, because a lot of guys pay me for consulting to find out if they've been scammed or not, especially back in the day. And they'd even evolved to have women who would be 40 and above average looking, but not some scantily clad 20-year-old. And still it would be a scam, right? Because even the guys who think, okay, I'm 55, overweight, not really Brad Pitt, but maybe a 40-year-old might be interested in me in Ukraine, right? But often, no, they're even scamming there. And the whole thing is just a charade to keep them on the chat or to scam them in person. I could probably speak for 3 hours about the scam part, but I think you get the message. So as I've seen it decline, I talk a lot at times with these owners of the industry, of the Ukrainian bride businesses. More and more than tell me that they're thinking of just closing down. And the question is, does it have much of a future? And I'm going to go into the alternatives, what you should be doing if you are someone who's been considering this. I was asked in the interview I gave for another channel. It's actually kind of a men's help channel that aims at Asian men. I gave an interview, and they asked me lots about this because they seem to think it was a bit more likely to work than it's been my experience advising guys over the years. Is there anything else? Because I actually looked at all these things beforehand. No, I think I've spoken at length about this, about the troubles they have. And I did make that video in 2022 where I predicted it would basically go the way of the Estonian bride business. Was it completely correct? Well, it's gone as a mass industry. I think it's just a lot of them seem to be talking about Filipino women or women in Latin America, other places. And, with the war here, the Ukrainian women en masse basically having left to a certain extent, although a lot of them have come back in, say, the last two years, what I see around here. But they're not women who are probably going to go to look for additional help. A lot of the women who would go would be women who will be probably not as attractive and probably over 35 and have children from a previous relationship, because here the divorce rate is over 50%. I know they're supposed to be traditional brides, but divorce is over 50%, higher than in the US. And in general, they are less financially emancipated, that is true. Other than that, I don't really see them as traditional in any real sense. Not saying that's good or bad, but that's the way they've been built up into this kind of fetish online. And it doesn't correspond with reality, especially the younger that the woman is. Maybe women over 50 maybe are more traditional, but that makes sense anywhere. Even in Ireland, they'd be more traditional in inverted commas. So that is what I see. And I actually put it into ChatGPT. I said, what is the chance that it will completely disappear in 2026? They said it's 15% chance it will be gone. 100% it will be like the Estonian bride business will not exist. So that's giving it, and it's a statistically significant, but pretty low chance of evaporating. But it will continue to decline. That quite probably it will become back to where it started, and a cottage industry, real niche industry. And if you are someone who's interested in that, drop a comment or write me a message if you, for some reason, want to drop a comment. Connor@connorklein.com. My email is also down below, and tell me why you are interested in matchmaking as an option, and why you wouldn't use the alternatives, which I will go into in a minute here. So you can see behind me, actually, the sun is almost gone behind the building over there, so we're going to lose it pretty soon. Got the last rays on this beautiful Sunday evening. I just go through and see there's nothing substantial. Yeah, I just wanted to comment that once, it was back in 2021, I made a video about where there actually are more traditional, in inverted commas, Christian women, because one of the replies I get is if I say, well, hey, go to the Caucasus, and they go, oh, they're Muslim there, like, for example, right, in, say, Chechnya or Azerbaijan or somewhere. But you do have Georgia and Armenia, in particular Armenia. Women are definitely way more traditional, inverted commas, than they are here in Ukraine. But that also means they're not as likely to get divorced and not as likely to want to marry a foreigner, because even I went and looked today, there is still no channel talking about traditional Armenian women, and I've been to Armenia. Definitely more traditional, inverted commas, than here, but still, even though I said in the video, no one has gone there and tried to create a marriage agency, because, well, I guess they probably have to invest in a new brand. It's just as easy for them to keep pretending that Ukrainian women are traditional, inverted commas, and interested in Joe Bob from Idaho than the reality. But I'm still a little bit surprised, because they definitely are more traditional, at least, or maybe they have matchmaking already amongst Armenians. I know there are a lot of Armenians in California. Maybe they just don't advertise in English, they only advertise in Armenian. Anyways, that is what I wanted to talk about in terms of its demise. I think it will further retract as an industry, and as I said, I've been talking more and more about business here in Ukraine in spite of the war and because of the war, because some industries like the defense industry are obviously going to do well. And yeah, that's if you are thinking of business here in Ukraine. I don't think that the Ukrainian Bride Business is the way to go. That said, I counted 5 foreign owners that personally I'm aware of, who are men, who own these kind of businesses. And all 5 of them, they met their partners. You know how they met them? They didn't meet them through a marriage agent. They met them by coming here and being a local business owner. So definitely you want to set up a business. Ironically, their business was being part of the Ukrainian Bride Business back in the day. But I find it kind of amazing that the 5 that I'm aware of all are with their partners that they met in person here. Normally through social circles, some met randomly in their stories about how they met. But they didn't meet through matchmaking. So kind of ironic that that's the business they use. But what they actually did to be successful, because they do have a partner, if you want to use that as the metric, is they came here and they started business, which is what I also encourage you to do going forward. But just not that business. I'm not really, I don't believe it's going to be that profitable going forward, considering how many of them are leaving the market. They're also doing kind of this virtual speed dating concept. Seems the only thing that's working for them at the moment. They all seem to be doing it. So I guess that's, some of them are making money from it, which makes a bit more sense to me, because basically you don't have to fly here to go do the speed dating. You can do it online. But personally, I can't really see why that would be a huge value. You could also do speed dating in your own hometown. That's a little bit more realistic, I would say, in general. If you really want to meet someone, the number one way to do it, and that's the only way, is to come here in person to the region. It doesn't have to be Ukraine if you're not okay with coming during the war, but it can be in Poland or in, I mean, there's many single women probably in Poland as there is in Ukraine. Ukrainian women, and you got the Belarusians as well as the Poles. Or you go to somewhere like Riga, Latvia, or you can even go up the road to Chisinau, Moldova, if you want. I've been bringing clients a lot to Kazakhstan. It's one of my favorite places, but that's obviously a lot further out of the way, and you have to like Asians to a certain extent, because it's 85% Asian. So those are some of the alternatives. And the main way is through social. Social Circle has made a comeback, even though the stats in the US say like 50% of relationships now start online. I went on a live stream with a guy who was born in Belarus. I always forget his last name, but it's Alex is his first name. I think it was, I'm thinking of, something with Chuk at the end, a very Belarusian last name. And yeah, I said to him that attractive people, they don't meet on dating apps in general, especially attractive women. They don't meet men. And he was a bit skeptical, but then afterwards I saw that he went and he did a video in Miami, the best part of Miami, and he stopped women he thought were very attractive and asked them, hey, where did you meet your boyfriend? And it was like really low, the percentage that met on dating apps or online. Obviously, none of them met through a matchmaker, to be clear. But most of them met through social circle or going to an event or something like that. It was like super high. Some have met on Instagram and a few have met on dating apps, but it was definitely less than 20%. It might even be less than 10%. I can't remember how many we said at the end. So even though in general 50% of people, according to stats me online, it seems that the more attractive women, for sure, they just basically don't use these kind of apps. Most, as you're probably aware, most of these apps now are very heavily full of men. Very few women go on to them. And yeah, men are not very selective compared to women, as we know. Most men would want to, at least for sexual access. Men, there's the adage that men are the gatekeepers of a relationship, but women are the gatekeepers of sex. So, and basically get commitment nowadays, for most people, they're going to have a sexual relationship first. So that means that women are going to be in a position to be selective at the beginning. So all that means that dating apps in general, especially if you are if you're in the top 1% as profiles, maybe it still makes sense to be on them, because then you would have still probably decent options depending where you are. But if you're outside that very narrow top band, I admit, and it's also very time consuming, I find, on these apps. You probably have to outsource it. There's a lot of, you wanted to save time. And now we have AI coming in, where probably be just lots of bots on these things pretty soon. So all that means that dating apps nowadays, compared to even 5-6 years ago, are not as attractive. You are a single guy, and especially if you're looking for someone who's above average in terms of attractiveness, we'll say above a 5. I think it's pretty hard, unless you're like in the top 1%. And probably if you are in that high percentile, you could probably do even better if you just go to events and socialize in person. That's why I always emphasize coming here to the region. Geomaxing, as it said 3 months or so in a city. It shouldn't be the only reason you come somewhere. You should have other things to do with and create a social circle, and actually play a role in society, even contribute in some shape or form, provide value. And that just makes it a lot easier to meet women as kind of a byproduct of being there in the first place. That's why I see also my clients, when we went to Kazakhstan in particular, we were there for an event. And just meet so many interesting people in general. And obviously some of them are women who are single. So it all kind of just flows from that. It's not something that you have to really even think so much about. A lot of these guys who give advice are kind of obsessed with trying to optimize the top of a dating funnel or something like that. But once you have so many options from the way you live your lifestyle and being in the right place and being a guy who's able to demonstrate his value, another way to do that is online, especially Instagram. Nowadays, Instagram is like a dating CV. That's another thing these matchmakers will never talk about. They kind of try to target people who are scared of social media or something. I guess older guys maybe are not as au fait with it, but you need to have an Instagram where you're able to display your value. You do that through the photos and the videos you have there, but also through the stories. And most women are on Instagram in this region, for better or worse. But it's a great way to display your value. So you need to get that set up. If you want to, I do have clients at times who just don't want to be on it because they have such a big public profile, they don't want to use it. And that makes it harder. So we found some alternatives, like having a Telegram group, for example, where they can, share the candid snaps and what they're up to with a more select number of people, where it's not going to be even searchable online. So because they're more concerned about their privacy. So that is something else that you need to dial in these days, is to make sure that you have a strong social media presence. If you are open to that, again, there are some exceptions. Build a social circle. We have this concept like familiar and unfamiliar settings. So like if you're on a dating app, the reason why I think it's like, I have a video where it's about how men and women perceive beauty here and also abroad. I'll go in, I think it's already down in the description of this video. You can go watch it afterwards. And if you're interested. But women in general, like men, when we see women, we basically have a bell curve, right? Most women are in the center. We kind of are pretty good at saying a 5 is a 5, a 6 is a 6, 7 is a 7. Women at hand think of a guy who's a 5, and the average is probably like a 2. But that is if it's on a dating app, because that's where we take the research from, because it's an unfamiliar environment. Well, once it becomes a familiar environment, then women in general start to see guys who are 5s as 5s, guys who are 7s as 7s. So they, in general, they will push their evaluation higher once they're familiar with the guy. So they met him in the context of being introduced by a friend, for example. So there's a really big difference when you're meeting someone without that familiar environment versus when you meet them in that familiar environment. For women, like us guys, we don't really respond the same way. If we see a hot chick, whether it's online or in person, we're cool with that, right? We're gonna probably assess her in the same way. But women, they assess more in context. So that's very important. That is why having a social circle and playing a function, going to events, being social is so important. If you're someone who struggles with that, you do definitely need to work on your social skills and work on your communication, because that is what is holding you back. And that's probably why you ended up relying on things like dating apps or even a matchmaker or something like that. Other things to mention. Yeah, a lot of these matchmakers, but this is just in general, it's a comment, it's not just matchmakers. They talk about love languages. There's no scientific basis for any of that. So I would just pretty much ignore it. It's kind of a very simple schema to explain how people communicate their attraction or desire. But there are way better theories if you start to read about psychology, explaining like attachment theory or communication theory. So I advise you to just go and read about those. But if someone is talking about their love languages all the time, it's a bit like astrology. Yeah, I think that's something more women are interested in than men on average. But I see a lot of matchmakers that talk about your love language. Yeah, I would ignore that. I would actually be suspicious of someone who's trying to persuade me that. What other snake oil are they trying to sell me? Because if you read into it, you realize there isn't much correlation with reality. I've always thought that, but I went and took a look about it in preparation here. And yeah, that's basically what I advise. And I don't know, you need to be able to speak to strangers, but not be the weirdo who walks around the shopping mall for 8 hours and stopping everybody with canned lines, acting awkward and being a minor public nuisance. Which is, if you look at the two main business models that have been trying to help guys in this space, on a practical level, it's matchmakers and the ones teaching the day game stuff, where they walk around the train station and outside Warsaw and annoying women. So neither of those do I recommend. You need to think about more strategically where you're going to be. First of all, the geographic locations, what we call geomaxing. Obviously, what you can work on for yourself to raise your own value. So your communication skills, some people call it game, but it's basically communication skills. Are you obese? Go to the gym. There are easy solutions to all that, even if a lot of people don't want to do them. What's your style like? Is it something that's going to make you more or less attractive to the kind of women you're interested in? Where are you going to go and hang out? What's your social circle like? Does it correspond with the type of women that you want to meet, or the type of guys you want to meet to have guy friends? As I always say, there's one of my former clients who was on my programs, we've met in person a few times. He bought some commercial real estate in Ukraine, also some residential afterwards. And he had a model girlfriend from Ukraine, but he said, Connor, the thing is I'm barely no mates. I don't have any guy friends. I mean, yeah, dating is not my big issue, but you want to be able to meet people who you're going to form that social circle with. We're social creatures, and it's not good for your mental health if you don't have friends, no matter where you are, no matter how good the dating is. You want to have cool guy friends to hang out with as well, shoot the breeze with. So that's something that's very important for your mental health as a man. That's what the studies show. And that's why a lad's night out is considered quite important for your mental health. And yeah, go out and socialize. That could mean going to bars and clubs. It doesn't have to be for everybody, but it is a place where people are corralled to be in a social environment. And you don't have to drink alcohol if you don't want to drink alcohol when you go there. I don't think that's really that taboo nowadays, not to drink alcohol in a place like Ukraine. I used to think that 10 years ago. But of course, if you like to drink, just don't drink to excess, obviously. And yeah, that's what I'll say in 2025. The real thing is to have a proper strategy about where you're going to be, kind of people that you're going to socialize with, how you're going to improve your own perception of value, whether that's going to be Jewel, how they perceive you on an app, right? Something like Instagram, how your public profile looks like. I think you should display your value. Think of it like a CV. You don't want to lie in your CV because you're not going to be the goods that arrive are not going to be what's in the bill of lading, is that what they call it? But you want to present yourself in a positive light, so you display your value. And maybe even if you throw in the things that would put people off, well, maybe I'll put off the people who are not a good match with you. So there are two ways of thinking about that. You shouldn't try and, that's why I think the candid clips on Instagram are really good, because then you can show what you're really up to. a lot of the time, and maybe for some women that's not a good fit, for others it is. So also you can risk being a little bit polarizing. Work on your finances, because socioeconomic status is important as a guy, more important than it is for us when we choose women on average. It's called hypergamy. And yeah, basically working your fitness and your other aesthetics. You can think about the looks maxing and all these procedures. I haven't invested too much into it, but I understand for some other guys, if you have something significantly wrong with you might want to think about a way to have that corrected. And yeah, that's it. But I think the most value for a guy comes from where you are, who you socialize with, and your communication skills. I think that's the real way. And that's definitely been the most successful way that I see overall, not exclusive, but overall for my clients, for my friends, for myself, and even for the guys who run the matchmaking services. So I'll leave that as the little bow tie at the end, and go and look at your questions and your comments on this beautiful autumn evening here. And just to emphasize it again, I will have a program for guys who want to come here and invest in Ukraine and thinking of business. That will be coming very soon. Cetra says, hello man, you're super energetic. What is the temperature in Celsius? Whoa, not sure, I'll have to look. On this spare phone, I don't know if I have the SIM card on. I think I have a foreign SIM card in it, so it's not going to tell me. But I would say today, it's definitely over 10 degrees. I'm actually a little bit warm in this. I just put it on just in case my winter parka is being cleaned at the moment. I actually brought it to Kazakhstan. But then when I got back, it needs to be cleaned. There's an oversight over the winter as I didn't have it cleaned. And now is definitely the time to do that, considering it's not that cold. But I would say, it's probably in the teens here. 20 degrees, Wayne says. I'm not sure, I think you're in Bucharest. Yeah, it's probably not far off it today. So it's quite nice temperature. We're not going to have that for that much longer. It's going to get cold here in Ukraine pretty soon. Roy says there, he's currently in Warsaw. Hey, what's up, man? Everything looks like Soviet-made buildings. Hotels, aptiekas, casinos, everything looks like apartments, windows, graffitis everywhere. Yeah, most of Warsaw was rebuilt after World War II. It got completely smashed in the Second World War. First you had the Nazis coming through. They took Warsaw. Just trying to think how the war started. Then they went further during Operation Barbarossa and invaded the Soviet Union. Soviet Union, Moscow and Berlin were allies at the time. And then obviously in the second part of World War II, Soviets came through, trashed Warsaw again. Just before that, you had the Warsaw Uprising, and then the Nazis basically destroyed more of the city and killed so many of its residents, whilst the Soviets looked on, because for them it was kind of convenient to see the Nazis and the locals kill each other, so that when they eventually came in, they had even less resistance to controlling the place. So yeah, unfortunately, a lot of it's been rebuilt. I think even the historical old town is basically just a restored old town. So not a super historic city. I think Warsaw makes sense if you are a guy who wants to be in a big city in the region. And because that's about 2 to 3 million. Otherwise, you can go to Prague as another alternative. It's a bit smaller. Actually, Almaty, where I was in Kazakhstan, is also that size. And we have Kyiv, which is like 5 million. It's even bigger here. But obviously the downside is the Russo-Ukrainian war and Russia firing rockets at us. Definitely Kyiv, it's basically on a daily basis. And although Kyiv is a big city, if you're more interested in coming here to Ukraine, I have lots of live streams I've done in the last few months. And statistically, the chances of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, it's like 1 in a million per day per capita in a major city in Ukraine. So yeah, you're more likely to get run over by get in a serious car accident in any U.S. city than you are to get hit by something here. But it's not comfortable. It's more the psychological effect of living with this terrorism threat on a daily basis over time. That's really a lot more painful and hurtful, I think, to the people, detrimental than actually the chance to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And being woken up in the middle of the night by, anti-aircraft fire and explosions and all that stuff. It's not the best for your nerves, although you get used to it, which is good and bad, because then you don't go to shelters as often once you start to stay out of them, unless it's really, really dangerous. So there are the options. So I still understand why guys go to Warsaw. I think it's an interesting city, And if you're a single guy, it's better than the average European city, and definitely better than the average city in North America. But yeah, if that were my only reason that you're on this live stream watching me, I would not be going there for that reason. Riga, way better in my experience. And actually most cities in the region are way better than Warsaw. Also because Warsaw has so many foreign guys. You got the whole debacle outside the train station and these shopping centers. They're like spread along to the shopping center across from it now, outside it, just pestering girls and stuff. So yeah, I just have a lot of guys in general there who are foreigners chasing girls basically. It's like the center in Europe for it. It's where all these coaches go as well to teach this day game malarkey. I did do it as a social experiment many years ago. And it wasn't that bad, but I never did it again. I realized this is like, why would I walk around doing this when there's so many more time efficient and better ways to meet women anyways. Let's see. Heath says, I would love to hear about the best place you think would be good for Westman looking for a serious relation in or near this. Well, any relationship like starts with getting to know a woman, having intimacy, and then deciding whether you want to continue a relationship, right? That's basically the way it works. We don't, almost no one in Western society, that includes here, like believes in no sex before marriage. So women being the gatekeepers to sex in general, it's kind of going to be the same process, even if you just want a one-night stand as opposed to a serious relationship. You're basically going to have to get to know someone either very briefly but obviously better the longer you get to know them, and then there's going to be some intimacy and then a relationship, and then you kind of decide if it's, you have to be able to maintain it if you want to, or you're going to have to decide to move on. So for Western man in this region, as I said, I think with clients, like where we brought clients, we'll say since 2022, Riga, Vilnius, Kaunas, Tallinn, Warsaw, Chisinau, Almaty, Astana, also the Ukraine, although it was more for relocation, and yeah, we did party a bit, but very little actually in Tennessee. So where do I think is the best place? And there's kind of a dichotomy that I've described a few times. It's like if you go up to the Baltics or even Warsaw, the weather is different, people look different, it's way blonder and taller, especially when you get into Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. So if that's what you're attracted to, then I also think the food isn't as good and the climate isn't as good, because it's way grayer and the soil isn't as good, the climate is good. Whilst if you come down here towards the south in Europe, in this region, then women tend to be more brown hair, a little bit darker, I would say, everybody is white and everyone's European. So I'm not talking about people suddenly been like from Africa or from Asia, but they definitely have more of these kind of traits that are a little bit less blonde, they're a little bit shorter on average, although you still have super tall people here as well. And the food, in my opinion, is a lot better. The climate is warmer, you have a lot more sun. So, okay, let's see the question, I'll come to in a sec. So that's kind of the dichotomy I see. So if you are really into leggy blondes, I say, well, then you should go to the Baltic states. And if you are more interested in girls who are a bit shorter, maybe a bit more brown hair, then probably somewhere like Romania, Moldova, this region would probably have more of that. It does have more than that. So I think you've got first the aesthetics. In terms of values, you're going to have to come and see if it's really for you or not. Being from, when you say Western, you mean North American. Well, here it's an allied state, you're in a war. You probably have more value just for the fact that you're American or Canadian, depending on what Donald Trump has said in the last 24 hours, of course. It's sometimes probably better not to be American, but you can be Canadian for sure, or a Brit for sure all the time here, and have, people are going to be interested in chatting to you just because there's a war. It's obviously a very special situation. Other than that, there's no foreigner factor, right? It's not like the early 90s when we had this probably legitimate cottage industry of matchmaking, where being from America, people were like, wow, everybody would want to talk to you because, or more or less because they were so fascinated, right? There's so many Americans who go to a place like Warsaw, like no one cares if you're American. Like it's better than being from other places in the world, that's true, but you don't really have that much of an advantage just because of your passport. That's why I made the video about passport bros shouldn't come to this region at all. Definitely not to the Baltics and Poland. I just don't know why they would, because their passport is actually weaker probably than a Polish passport and a Latvian passport nowadays. So, and the prices are a lot higher than say in Moldova or here or in Kazakhstan. So, yeah, you can have that economy. It sounds like we'd probably have to talk in a consulting call, giving a shameless pitch there. Book one down below, because there's just so many factors that go into figuring out where's going to be the best place for you. And of course, you can go to all of them by yourself and DIY. You haven't watched my content, but I probably direct you quicker to go into the right places, as I did with a client recently. It's not even that recent anymore, but I've talked about him a bit recently on the live streams, because he was going to go to Warsaw and then he went to Riga. There's Roy. Let me know how you find Warsaw otherwise, in addition to the aesthetics, which are obviously not to your liking. Wayne says, Armenian Brides Cooperative sounds like another business to underwrite. Well, anyway, we can talk about it in due course. Maybe that is the business to start. Maybe I should stop giving these dodgy matchmakers who watch my channel free business ideas. I should just head to Armenia, head to Yerevan. I'm being facetious. That was actually something that was asked a lot in 2018-19. Would I set up a marriage agency? I was like, no. So I'm just not interested in running one. But I would have probably made more money in the short. Well, I don't even think so, to be frank. But I would have made my money in a different way. And going forward, I definitely don't want to be in that business. Barry says, I'm too old for your service. 65 like in Brooklyn, but love your content. You have a net manager from, yeah, that's Elena. Barry, how is she doing? How's the season? When you do? I think we will only do an interview next year. We normally do an interview once a year with a little bit of a gap, I think, at the beginning after the invasion. But I don't really see much value in doing more than one. I want to talk about other things in this channel in general. There's just a lot more interesting stuff, I think, especially in the business side. And I see that the last 6 weeks, I've gotten so many comments from guys who watch the live streams about doing business here and moving here, that, yeah, this is more interesting. Of course, some of them are single and also interested in the dating side, but it's kind of, I have a hunch you'd be even more successful if that's not the main reason to be here. If you're here to do business and actually set up your life, then as long as there's obviously things, bottlenecks to figure out for guys, especially in their communication, if they struggle with that, and building the social circle and all that stuff. But in general, yeah, if you're coming here and actually going to play a role in society, it's already makes you stand out. Let's see. Barry says, what about interviewing the owners of Hard Rocket? Interesting proposition. But the last comment that Stryker made to me in a messenger, I'm not so sure I'm going to give them my platform, considering the language used. I'll leave it at that. It was many years ago. But they actually are doing better from what I can see on YouTube than Match Guarantee. They actually seem to be the only one that's kind of maybe their audience is about the same as it was before if you look at the views. Whilst all the others, he had halves every year from what I can see on all the other channels. I think that's just overall about the region, if that's the topic you're talking about, because Ukraine in general, I mean, the content that talks about the war obviously does very well. But if you're talking about lifestyle, obviously here, there's a very niche market to that, and that's fine. I'll just help that niche market. Barry says he was in Russia in 1987. Wow. You should write some more about what your experience was like then. That's pretty interesting. And Wayne says, you are barely older than I am, but it helps to be closer to the target countries, kind of thing. Yeah, you need to be in the region. You're in Brooklyn. And it can work, matchmaking. And just as a business with this Ukrainian traditional bride fetish, I mean, the age demographic of the women who fall into that, even anywhere close to that stereotype, is like every passing year it's older and older, right? It's not a 20-year-old Ukrainian hottie. And she's probably been living for the last 4 years in Germany or in France or Ireland, and she has Instagram. Like, I understand for older guys, when I say older guys, older than me, but I even think some guys my age, because I'm 47. Like, they kind of live under a bit of a rock if they're not on social media and what the access of information and images that girls have. Like, I remember this time it was really trending for Ukrainian girls to want to go to Norway because so many influencers were posting. That's not even that extreme. Obviously, you can go to Maldives or, you know, the whole Dubai thing. Well, when I was in Ireland, when I was 19, the people didn't even talk about going to Maldives. They didn't even talk about going to Norway. That's how much it's changed. And, you know, Ireland wasn't, when I talk about 19, it wasn't as well as it is today, but it wasn't that poor, and we had visa-free access. So, yeah, it's just ease of travel has changed as well. Just don't see how this has much staying power in this region. I just see it going the way of Estonia. But I'm sure there's so much money is put into the brand. So that couple wanted to show you some upbeat Odesa spirit in spite of everything that's been going on here. Barry says, pictures very wild. Every city had a Lenin museum. I'm sure that would have been interesting to have seen. I did not come to this region back then. I guess how do we want to describe this region? But I had been in Poland, I think, before. No, actually, I only went to Poland, I think, first time in 2008. 2008, so that's already 17 years ago. Wow. What are you seeing as the most popular businesses the West are starting in? Well, Eastern Europe, you know, that for me is just Russia and stuff, so who knows what outside of the war economy, I'm not sure there's much business being created there. Popular businesses here, obviously guys investing in real estate is a big thing. And here in Ukraine, defense industry, enormous. So many, defense, you know, defense industry CEOs, i.e. arms dealers, it would be the layman's term for them that come here, because this is one of the results of the invasion is that Ukraine, and to a certain extent Russia is going to be as well, the cutting edge for new weapons. You know, it's terrible. That's the industry that's growing here, but, you know, Moscow wants to leave us alone. We'll go back to doing other things. But that's basically what Ukraine is going to continue with after this war is over, because they're going to have so much knowledge and expertise now. It's going to be so valuable, and they're going to be able to sell it. And there's going to be lots of jobs with it. So, yeah, it's a huge investment industry at the moment for obvious reasons. And investors from Western Europe in particular that I met here. Also, agricultural industry has always been huge here. This is the breadbasket of Europe. And I think it depends what happens with the European Union in terms of how they deal with the common agricultural policy and giving access without tariffs to Ukrainian produce, because obviously they're huge competitors here for a lot of producers in Central Europe like Hungary or Slovakia or Polish farmers, because the soil here is just better in this region and the climate, so they can produce a huge amount. It's flat, so it's just great agricultural terrain. And as I said, it's been known as the breadbasket of the Soviet Union, and it was really the breadbasket of Europe to a certain extent. So that is an enormous industry. I also get queries about that from guys who actually have legitimate big businesses in it. So, yeah, if you want to do, there's lots of things, and this is what I'll be discussing in my program. So just make sure that you're on my mailing list for that. And I'll be sending out an email probably at the end of next week, and once I've worked a bit more on it. And then I'll do a launch probably the week after. That's my current timetable. Other business, I did have a client who opened, he bought up some coffee kiosks, but then he exited that. He also then wanted to start a cool cocktail bar, because that's very highly profitable. This is pre-2022. It's 2021, 2020. And then he had issues with the neighbors. He actually had it, he was cleaning it out and renovating it, and then it never got launched. He just said he wasn't able to do it. Or maybe, yeah, that's what he told me anyways. Whether there's some other issue, I don't know. But yeah, otherwise he renovated. It was quite popular to take historic buildings, apartments in historic buildings in Kyiv, renovate them, and then put them on Airbnb. The rental yields were insane, over 15% if I remember at the time. So 15 to 20% rental yield, which is phenomenal. Yeah, and presumably it will be the same after the war, but there's a lot of factors that go into real estate in wartime situation. Here, the price of property is the same as in 2021. Basically, as a generalization, it's not that different. in the big cities like Kyiv. It's actually higher in places like Lviv, Chernovtsi, Uzhhorod, the cities where further in the west where people move to more proportionally, and they basically rebounded in places here. If Ukraine were to liberate all the occupied territory, presumably a lot of people, well, first of all, they'll come back from Western Europe, a certain number of them, so that would obviously push the prices up. But then they would leave, presumably, to go back to Donetsk or to Crimea or to somewhere else that's currently occupied or close to the front line. So, yeah, that would then put downward pressure on prices here in Odesa or Kyiv, for example, Western Ukraine. And then foreign investors will come in en masse, presumably as well, because then they feel very comfortable with their investment. But yeah, it depends on how the war ends, of course. So there's just a lot of uncertainty. But there are definitely, if you are more risk-taking and your calculation is that Ukraine will, well, let's take Girkin, the Russian ultra-nationalist, from prison's calculations. Like he said, basically Russia has almost no chance of winning at this point, and the best they can hope for is some sort of protracted impasse. And it's just as likely that they'll lose completely and Ukraine will liberate everything eventually. So that's his assessment. So if you go for the Girkin assessment, then you're probably pretty comfortable in investing in a place like Odesa. Of course, you know, your building might be hit by something. That is an additional risk that you're going to have to take. And so none of my friends have had their apartments or clients have had their apartments destroyed. Actually, I think the striker from Hard Rocket, I think his apartment might have been damaged. Someone sent me a clip from Telegram but this is a couple of years ago, that I think he had an apartment near, there's a business center on the way out to Arcadia from the center. I think it's on Shevchenko Avenue maybe. And yeah, my understanding is that, if I'm wrong about that, he can always write in the comments here. But he's the only person I think I know who had an apartment that was really damaged. One of my friends, yes, when they hit the Bristol Hotel, which is here in the center, historic hotel, his apartment is across the street, so he had some damage to the roof. But, you know, at the end of the day, nothing catastrophic. So, but that's obviously another risk of investing here. Yes, Josh, Odesa does look really nice in November. Yeah, it's a fantastic November. I'm not sure I could go swimming. You could, depends how cold the water is. Barry says he was in Moscow, Kyiv, Yalta, Leningrad is now St. Petersburg. Yeah, beautiful city. And wish Trump would have said they would give Tomahawk missiles, but I just like I have the geopolitics channel where I can get all that stuff off my chest. I just ignore almost everything Donald Trump says at this stage because he keeps flip-flopping in his rhetorics. One day he's shouting at Zelensky apparently to surrender in his office. Next time he's warning Putin, and threatening to give tomahawks. And Wayne says there were surfers and fishermen out there last week, in Odesa. I will be definitely changing my content going forward. I'm going to film a lot more going into next year about life here, I think. I think the time has come for that. And we will see. I still have to make video from Warsaw vlog, from Riga vlog, my 3 fashion show vlog, summer Chisinau vlog, and yeah, I actually made a video for traveling here as well. I guess we can call it a vlog as well, vlog style. That's 5 videos. And yeah, we'll have some more vodcast interviews with interesting people, both in Moldova, here, and anything else I got planned? Well, I'm going to make some sort of winter vlog when I go to Almaty because we're going to be there during ski season, so I think it'll be an interesting variation. So, but I'm also curious to see which parts of the region you guys are most interested in. I feel like Ukraine is rebounding for guys who want to spend time here in spite of everything and interested in investing in business, buying real estate. Yeah, so probably the topics are a bit different, and obviously geographical location. Me talking about Almaty is maybe not as interesting, although I have demand to go there. So super cool city. I love Kazakhstan. It's well, I love everywhere I go to. That's why I go there. Like like, for example, I don't like Sofia in Bulgaria. Went there twice, didn't enjoy it. But I'm sure if I was open to it, I could find clients who want to go there. But it's not really what I want to do. That said, I will interview Elena McLeod again. I spoke to her during the week, and she is based there. And actually, the taxes are interesting in Bulgaria at the moment, the tax situation. So it is one option. Another one is Albania. But I've been to Albania. Yeah, it's not terrible or anything, but it's not for me personally. And yeah, I'm already spread pretty thin, I think, to talk about these things. I will, maybe I mentioned at the start of the live stream, in addition to the program about coming here, it's going to be Ukraine from destruction to opportunity is not the name I agreed with the guys who I spoke with about who are interested in it. Yeah, destruction to opportunity, that's what we agreed. It was like a almost unanimous, bar one, what's the word? Objector to the title. I am considering a business here focused on Ukraine, but I'm going to reveal that in due course because I have certain steps I need to take to set it up. But it's something that's been suggested to me by 3 entrepreneurs here who are foreigners, and also by some other people who are just not here. They've asked me why I haven't done it. So I guess I should go and do it if that many people are telling me. Plus I've investigated a little bit, and the profit margins are pretty big. So yeah, that's the thing. There are a lot of opportunities that arise because so few people have been willing, because of the war, which is understandable, to invest and build stuff. But that leaves a gap, especially for post-war, where yeah, when business comes back, then suddenly everyone will try to come back in, right? But that apartment that you wanted, that might have cost 100K 6 months, a year before, hopefully it's not 10 years before if the war goes on that long, then it'll be what, 150, 200,000. So yeah, the early bird catches the worm. But there's a lot of factors that go into that. So you have to find with your risk profile the right opportunities. And it might necessarily be real estate, even if that's the most popular. I see a lot of other things that are definitely extremely profitable. The obvious one being the defense industry. So, other questions and comments? If you are interested in what I had to say about the Ukrainian Bride Business, go and check out the playlist down below. There's all the content there. But I think I gave you a pretty good overview of the whole business model, what they use. I didn't make it super technical going into granular detail, but just an overview of why it's a business and why it doesn't make sense to me going forward that it'll be a big, massive business anymore. But maybe it's going to make a comeback. I'm not really sure how, because so many of the single women left and moved to Western Europe that even with the tragic loss of so many Ukrainian men during the war, it's not unbalanced. Even with a lot of guys at the front, it's kind of like 50-50 here when I go out. Maybe slightly more women, it's true. If you go to certain cafes, yeah, you go to cafes during the day, it's probably more women. Probably you go to bars, slightly more men. But yeah, it's close to 50-50. And yeah, because there's like almost 1 million men in the armed forces, so presumably most of those are away at the moment. But so many of the women left, and the ones who are like, on average, the women who were more likely to stay, unmarried, more likely than married, if their husbands are not there with them. And then if they speak English, also more likely to adapt to being abroad. And if they're interested in foreign guys, more likely to find them there. So yeah, I think for the typical marriage agency wife hunter, like, doesn't make sense to me. I think they should, if they don't have options back home, they should be going to the Philippines or somewhere, to a small island. There's a YouTuber, I've forgotten his name, but I took some of his B-roll to put in my videos maybe a year or two ago, and yeah, he has some wife who's more than 20 years younger than him or something, and he documents that, and he's overweight. So that's kind of an American. So yeah, we met her on some island, some small island somewhere, from what I understood. But that's where your competitive advantage is if you're a wife hunter. It's not going to be in Odesa. It's going to be in a Filipino island or somewhere else. Could be in Central America. Could be Latin America. It just depends where your preference is, I guess. In Europe, because I was kind of asked that where to go as a Western guy. Again, it depends on your preferences and where you are in terms of perceived value. Because some countries, obviously, a certain look will do better than others. Certain values will do better than others. Like if you're one of these guys who supports Russia in the war, and you're going to hang out in Warsaw, like you must be, well, you're delusional. If you think Poles and in general, or even you and Ukrainians, too many of them are going to be interested in you when they find out that's who you support. But you will be amazed. At least I'm amazed how many of them are there, because they make this content, so many of them, and they show up in other people's content. I was watching a YouTuber the other day, and he's kind of in the dating sphere, I guess. And he was walking around Warsaw, and then this guy, he was walking around, I don't know where he knew him from. It didn't seem he knew him very well. And he suddenly started talking about, basically make it clear he supported Putin. And then he's like talking to girls who had, I don't know, it looked like Ukrainian name. Like long term, I mean, of course he can lie about it in the short term, but what's going to happen? And why is he in Warsaw? Why is he in Warsaw? It's like the most hostile country to Russia almost in the entire continent, other than Ukraine. So for 90% of Poles, that's going to be like a deal breaker when they find it out. So I know why he's there, but I guess he has his reasons. Why doesn't he just go live in Moscow? At least that would be congruent. Okay, having rambled about that a little bit. Donald says, hey buddy, I hope you and Shale are okay. It's cold here, it's 52 degrees. Fahrenheit, not really au fait. I don't really remember what Fahrenheit is in Celsius anymore. We used to maybe have in Ireland when it was really small, but just the US uses it. But it sounds pretty cold. All right, it's 52 degrees. That must be less than 10 Celsius. So Josh says, avoid Bulgaria at all talks. Terrible place, no going for sure. Josh doesn't want other foreigners going there. I think that's why he's writing that. The British fellow, okay. Yeah, well, you can be thankful that on my live stream I don't say much good about Bulgaria other than the personal income taxes, and the business taxes are actually pretty good. The British fellow says, I heard the border with Belarus is now closed with Lithuania. Yeah. Yes, that is the current situation. The border with Belarus is closed.